Welcome everyone to the CantoCast / Star Wars Media. This will be going out on both platforms and whichever one you're listening to. I appreciate you guys stopping by and listening to Treverbeast and I talking about some Master and Apprentice. Now, if you are a follower of the CantoCast, you have most likely seen Trevor on the show, either once or twice, depending, if you were able to catch both episodes. But for those of you on the YouTube side that don't know, Trevor Beast is a good friend of mine and the show. He is, I guess, one of, or maybe the main official curator on Sporkle for Star Wars. So he is the Star Wars guru, as I like to refer to him. He is definitely very knowledgeable in his Star Wars trivia. And he agreed, thank goodness he did. I'm really glad he did. He agreed to read Master and Apprentice with me, and we have both, again, fully read the book. So before we dive in, I will say spoiler alert. We will be spoiling this book extremely, so there's your warning. But now I'll let Trevor say hi, and then we can roll right into it.
Yep, thank you, Tristan, for having me. Like I said, well, actually, no, I haven't really said anything, but I really enjoyed this book from Claudia Gray. I've already read her book Bloodline right before starting this, and I mean, I enjoyed both books quite a bit, and just really how well it connects into, the rest of the Star Wars canon, and these new characters as well, like are very good. Like for instance, I really like the characters of Rahara and Pax, these like jewel thieves, you know, um, you know, trying to steal some illegal rocks or sell them for profit, and just their dynamic as well was very nice.
Absolutely. It was really cool to see their dynamic. I guess that, diving right into the Jewel Thieves. It's definitely an element that I guess really helped also bring out Qui-Gon and Obi-Wan's relationship because, we know also going into this, but it really gets heavily expressed throughout the book that Qui-Gon Jinn is your non-conventional, not by the book, kind of more of your street savvy, street smart type of Jedi. He has obviously, and we can dive further into this because it's a whole separate topic. He has major criticisms with the Council that ultimately leads him to deny, them, not deny them, but reject their offer of joining the Council. And Obi-Wan Kenobi is kind of the exact opposite. He's just super by the book, almost protocol droid Jedi. You could almost refer to him as, because he has his list of rules that he is going through in his head every time a decision has to be made. And by bringing out these characters with Wick and Pax, it really shows just the division between Qui-Gon and Obi-Wan, because Obi-Wan's like, we have to turn these people in, like they're thieves, they're criminals, this we should not be dealing with these people. And Qui-Gon's like, actually, there's a lot of benefits to be gained from these people, and we should, utilize them and team up with them to help investigate the moon of Pijal. And that dynamic, of course, gets it develops, but in Obi-Wan kind of warms up to him. You could say by the end, like he really starts to, I guess, put a lot more trust not only in Wick and Pax, but also in Qui-Gon, and ultimately it teaches Obi-Wan important lessons about working with any resources you have, even if they're not necessarily within protocol. But what did you think of that whole relationship with, I guess, between Qui-Gon and Obi-Wan? I know that there's a lot to dissect here because it's a very complex one, but kind of give us your overall thoughts on it.
Well, yeah, my thoughts is, I really like their dynamic as well, and just the different things of how Qui-Gon is studying these prophecies in the archives, and then Obi-Wan's like, oh my gosh, why are you wasting your time with these? They're just symbolic. That they're not very important, and some different things. And then also like the dynamic of Obi-Wan's just doing these basic cadences with his lightsaber, for different training, and Qui-Gon just hasn't really taught him any more advanced moves or any stuff, while almost all his other peers are going through those sort of things. And what we get to learn, a lot about Qui-Gon, especially with his, upbringing, um, with, Count Dooku as his master. Well, I
Yeah.
mean, I guess he's not the Count, but Dooku. Um,
Right.
and I really love these flashbacks of how Dooku is teaching Qui-Gon about some different prophecies and stuff, and then also how Rael,
Uh huh.
Rael, or
Real
something.
Avaros.
Yes.
Yep.
Yeah, and how Rael is, already was the, Padawan of Dooku before becoming a knight, and then how he kind of has this, like older brother role to Qui-Gon throughout various flashbacks and stuff, and I loved how that was utilized in the book.
Absolutely. I mean, Dooku is, even as himself, like, gets so much character development, even though the story never even focuses on Dooku. Like, the story is told through Qui-Gon, really, as far as the flashbacks go. It might, like, from my perspective, like, okay, this is what Qui-Gon is thinking, this is what he's saying. But, in turn, that also gives more elements to Dooku that we, or at least I really didn't even maybe fully understand or recognize, just by watching the movies in the Clone Wars. Like, we know, or at least I knew originally that yes, he was originally a Jedi that turned, but we never quite know why he turned necessarily. At least I didn't. And this book really filled me in on, I guess, Dooku's philosophies and kind of his really philosophy, the main thing, on not only the Jedi but on the prophecies, and I think the reason why Yoda was so cautious about letting Qui-Gon really embrace, these visions that he was having is because he didn't want him to be the next Dooku. Because at this point, he's left the Jedi Order, and it's pretty much in the quest of learning about the future, learning about how much more power you can have whenever you, dive into the temptations that the Jedi, say not to dive into. And everyone knew that Qui-Gon, even himself, he admitted it throughout the book, was like, yes, like, I've touched darkness by doing this, but I don't feel like I'm falling into the dark side. And that philosophy getting debated was just a really cool aspect to see, especially within the flashbacks.
Yeah, and I know that Qui-Gon mentioned, something that happened on Felucia, and I'm wondering how much they touched on that within this book. I'm trying to remember.
It was maybe like a sentence, it was
Yeah.
not much at all.
Okay.
Um,
Well, I know it was mentioned at least a couple times, and I'm like trying to
okay, yeah,
figure out like what exactly happened there, but I guess this book didn't tackle that as much, but I I feel if I'm not mistaken, I feel like Qui-Gon gave um, Pax at the end of the book that one diamond
the,
from Mustafar.
right, the Mustafar blood diamond or whatever it was.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, to like compensate for his
losses.
losses
Yep.
in that, or just his bravery with going to rescue Rahara
Mm-hmm.
and some different stuff with that. I'm wondering if there's a connection with that diamond and his Felucia thing or something like that. But
Mm. Maybe I know Qui-Gon's like, I remember when this was given to me, 30 years ago. He's like, but it's not the actual object that matters for me. It's the memory of someone giving that to me and me understanding the importance. I don't remember where he was when he received it though. It could have been Felucia. I just don't remember. But it it really was like Qui-Gon, was just, I mean, really all the characters in this book were really well written. And it's kind of funny because we haven't even started talking about the plot yet,
well,
which
yeah,
is
well, we still haven't even mentioned Princess Fanry.
Fanry. I don't know
Yeah,
how we,
yeah,
pronounce her.
but
And then of course in her head of security, Darren.
mhm.
Um, but if we want to talk about, kind of open up the plot a little bit of this
Okay.
book, and we can just kind of, bounce off of that. It I really appreciated the world building, and that's something I love about Star Wars books is that it has a chance more than like anything movie can to really like build the world that they are in or the planet. So I think Pajal was just really well built up from the ground up. I mean, we learned about the different customs, the history of the system, about the geography of the planet, the people that live there. It was just really well built. I think that gave it such a strong foundation to build off of. Just this really not secretive, but kind of like you could tell that and of course, because the whole point of this book was to get the hyperspace lane open, at least from a Republic standpoint, this planet kind of flew under the radar up until really the modernization of or it trying to modernize itself with a more of a democratic government with a hyperspace corridor that would allow way easier trade throughout the rest of the galaxy. But this was kind of an untouched world, you could say, before the Republic and including Avaros. I don't know. I just feel like it was a really unique thing because of just how untouched it was. What did you think about the world building in the book?
Oh yeah, I really liked a lot about how they talked about the differences between Bajal and then its moon and like the now I'm trying to think of it, but basically those Kyber crystals that weren't Kyber.
It's Cohen or something like that.
Yeah.
Cohen crystals. Yeah, the Kyber that wasn't Kyber.
Yeah, and
yep.
Those different things, and then I'm also trying to think of it. What's the Yeah, you have the opposition,
right?
And Halen Azuka is
right.
like the leader of that, but then you also had that other faction that was actually doing the violence.
The black suits. Oh, it was black something.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know. It's like it just blanked.
I mean, they mentioned it so many times.
Yeah. The Black Guards. The Black Guards.
The Black Guards.
That's who it was. Yeah. Yep.
But
yeah.
And I really loved how they tackled these different things, and especially when Qui-Gon and Obi-Wan investigated more thoroughly,
right.
Pajal's moon, and met up with Halen Azuka, and just how Qui-Gon was able to basically take what Halen was saying and rationalizing it, and just saying, okay, this makes sense of how these patterns of protest from bombings to just a balloon message or hollow recordings or whatever, just the varying degree and how they don't really match up.
Right, exactly. They're saying it's random. There's no clear agenda to any of these attacks, other than they obviously knew that there was something, they were protesting something the government was doing. But it became more obvious that it started becoming more and more about its moon, and they started talking about how originally, even Azuka was wrong about just how much of the lunar citizens made up of the total population of the system. She's like, oh yeah, it was 24%. It ended up being a third actually, which is huge. That's when you're creating a democracy, you can't just leave out a third of the group. And of course that plays more into, I guess, Fan Rai's type of her character, which was really odd. I thought Fan Rai was very interesting, I guess is a good way to put it. The twist of the book, her trying to seize absolute power and rebel against Churka. I guess that's how we'll pronounce them, Churka. It I understand it, and I don't think it's bad or anything, but you got to think what was if she defeated Churka, how the rest of the galaxy would do something about it. The Republic would intervene. There's no way that Pajal could probably stand on its own 2 feet after taking down the major corporation that's helped economically run the planet for centuries.
That's a good point. I mean, how Princess Fanry had Darren tried to assassinate Merritt Cole, the
the
main
Churka
leader for
the Churka representative. Yep.
And I was under the impression that Princess Fanry's most importantly just trying to get Churka off of Pajal,
right?
Not necessarily eradicate them completely, but just on her planet.
Right. It's just, I feel like it was such a, and again, maybe this just just built into her character, but it's a short-sighted plan that maybe she didn't really think through, because there could have been so many other ways to to reduce the effects of Churka, to eliminate slavery. But then even with her servant, Caddy, I don't know.
It's Caddy.
Even Caddy, overthrew her when they were about to attack. Like, you're just doing this because you want power, not because you know, believe in the good of the people anymore. Like, so, you know, I'm taking over, you know, what's going on. And so you could see, like, her own people, once they realized that it wasn't about, you know, improving Pajal's, you know, social, you know, policies and, you know, reforming everything. It was about just her wanting absolute power. So once they realized that, they're like, you know, they kicked her out, essentially. They overthrew her, which was, of course, just a really, you know, good element that shows that there was just so much political disagreement, upheaval, unrest, you know, any of those terms will really fit. In those final few hours, I would assume is how long between the ceremony and obviously the ships, you know, that whole sequence, probably within half a day or so. Um, but just seeing that just revolution get twisted and turned was a really neat thing to see. And of course, we're already at the end of the plot, but there's so much good stuff in the middle.
Well, yeah. I mean, I could also talk about how I really loved how they fleshed out, you know, Rael, Avaros, and
Mm-hmm.
how, you know, his Padawan with the, you know, Advent disaster that happened with mutineers and a slicer dart
Mm-hmm.
droid, and how Rael blames himself in a lot of ways and is trying to like redeem himself in a way by taking care of Princess Fanry for, you know, these 8 years on, you know, Pijal. And I really love like the connection of that, and I can understand that, you know, as a
Right.
character standpoint.
No, yeah, it really adds in. It makes obviously Avaros way more complicated as a character because he's dealing with, you know, he's being haunted essentially by this past Padawan who he pretty much let down, and because he didn't follow protocol, and you know that here comes that whole philosophy back. Didn't follow protocol, pretty much, and it cost his Padawan's life, which of course he um, puts on himself, which you can understand and you can even agree. Like, he wasn't cautious enough. He wasn't, you know, maybe not thinking smartly enough. He was just kind of charging into battle when there could have been a better way to do it. But you know, just it obviously resonates with him, and it ends up, I guess, clouding his judgment with Fanrai because everything he does is in defense and in protection of Fanrai instead of letting her kind of grow out as a person and as a leader. He kind of keeps her really, I guess, just super protected, super isolated from the outside world. And of course, you can understand why Fanrai really just hates him at the end of the book, is because she's like, yeah, you never taught me how to lead and how to be brave and how to, you know, make the smart decision. You just were protecting me and, you know, hiding me from the truth the entire time. So, and you know, that's also something you understand, and um, I guess a kind of running theme among Avaros and Jin and Dooku is that what Dooku obviously trained his Jedi to not prioritize any sort of protocol or Jedi teachings whenever trying to get something done, and you can see how that complicates um, their missions because they're doing the missions within the parameters of the Jedi, not within the parameters of, I guess, just independent Force users. So that's also, you know, a running theme that shows. And even if like Dooku was right about, hey, like these are and Jin and Avaros, like, you know, obviously there are some very valid criticisms of the Jedi Order. I mean, they fall about, you know, 15, 8 to 20 years after this, of course, in Episode 3. So it obviously was a major problem, but you know, even still, you would expect more of them to at least honor, you know, because they really did bend and break there's some major rules that the Jedi Order set out for them in the book. But I don't. What do you think about that whole conflict between, you know, the people like Avaros and Jin who have their major criticisms with the Order, so therefore they, you know, kind of have their own parameters whenever they go out on missions. Well, I mean, what do you just think about that?
Well, I mean, well, I'm just thinking of like how Qui-Gon is kind of defiant. You know, it just reminds me of the Phantom Menace as well, like how Qui-Gon's defiant, you know, to the Council and saying, you know, I'm going to take Anakin is my Padawan learner, and then the council's like, you already have a Padawan with Obi-Wan. It's impossible to take a second and stuff. So
Right.
I'm just reminded of that, like how Qui-Gon is, like he respects the council, but he's not going to always just go follow their orders blindly. In a sense, he's going to think about what's best, I guess, for everyone, or what's best in his mind,
Right.
his conscience and stuff. And a lot of that is from Dooku's his apprenticeship with Dooku.
Yeah, absolutely. And do you think that Dooku was justified in leaving the Jedi Order?
I mean, justified. I mean, if he wanted to leave the order, he should be able to, in a sense. But
right,
I don't know. It's also a bit complicated, especially when I think of I mean, I know this might be going off track, but also thinking of
don't worry about it.
Clone Wars, season 6, whenever Anakin and Obi-Wan go to Obadiah, where the Pike Palace is, and they're trying to figure out these different things of Master Sifo-Dyas, and then they figure out that Dooku was also like kind of the culprit behind that sort of thing. And that was kind of that was kind of eye-opening for me in a way of that kind of revealed a bit more of Dooku's character. Well, I mean, we already knew him to be the villain, and a villain in a sense in episode 2 and 3, but it flushed it out a bit more. And that's see, in that Clone Wars episode and stuff, you learn a bit more of his sinister ways stuff, whereas this book kind of makes it a bit more justified in a sense.
Yeah, exactly.
It doesn't really tackle his dealings with the dark side, except maybe a little bit at the very end, whenever he's contacting Rael and asking him to join him on Sereno.
Yeah, sort of thing. But exactly. I think that it built a strong case for Dooku to leave the Order. Like, this book didn't hold back in like not only like theorizing about why the Jedi are wrong, but showing examples of, okay, this is why people like Dooku leave the Order, the Jedi Order, is because there's just like these faults have been repeated many times, and the Jedi are kind of I mean, they're being so like passive to the point of where is it even like what can even get accomplished with their point of just they're being so passive that they're not just taking any action on stuff that's needed. And you can see why Dooku left the Order. I mean, you can almost argue, I mean, do you think if Qui-Gon Jinn would have would have lived past the Phantom Menace, do you think he could have prevented the uprising of I guess you could say Palpatine, and also Anakin's fall to the dark side, and B, do you think he would have stayed in the Order for much longer after that?
I mean, I'd like to say yes for the most part of, I guess, stopping Anakin from joining the dark side. Of course, there's a lot of factors that explain why he did that, not just Padme, but some different stuff, like with the Clone Wars as well, that they tackle that a lot too. But I'm not sure about the Palpatine thing, but I mean, they're considering he already has control of that, because that's more like a political, like the Senate thing. And, Qui-Gon is just a Jedi, knight or master. Wouldn't really have much sway politically to stop Palpatine in that regard.
I didn't mean so. I mean, yeah, politically, I totally agree. I was thinking more of like on the Force side. Like, would he have been able to detect that Palpatine was a Sith Lord? Like, do you think he had that foresight where the Jedi did not? Like, could he have realized that, hey, this guy is a Sith Lord and one of the most powerful there's ever been? Or do you think...
that's interesting. I'm still gonna have to lean towards the no, but I mean, I guess considering Qui-Gon's coming at it from a different perspective, which is ultimately why he even got offered a spot on the councils because of his different perspective compared to the rest of
Right.
them. So maybe, the Shroud of the Dark Side wouldn't have clouded him as much as, let's say, Yoda or any of the other ones about what Palpatine's doing, but it's really hard to say definitively about that.
It is definitely. And it's just we can, it's fun to theorize about all this. I mean, that's what makes part of the what ifs are of Star Wars are really fun to discuss. But I'll try to rein us back in here to Master and Apprentice.
Yeah.
So I guess let's see, what can we jump into as
Well,
far
I
as
mean, one thing that I found really intriguing was how Qui-Gon, kept viewing Rael, or I think it was Qui-Gon himself, but the book itself definitely said that Rael definitely had a it was treated differently with all the rest of the
yeah
Jedi
yeah
because he was brought in at a older age, where he was brought at age 5, which was considered very old to bring in. And then
mm-hmm.
that's very ironic when then you think that Anakin was 9 years old in the Phantom
Exactly.
Menace,
And
so he
there's
was almost double that.
yeah, exactly. There's so many like parts in the book. And that's a great example of one where you can see like the mistakes that the Jedi Order made with Anakin. Say, okay, well, we're never gonna bring a kid this old again. We're never gonna do this or that, and then it all happens to Anakin, and you're just like, oh, geez, like I don't, we don't know why the Jedi just let all that slip right through their fingers, because they really went against all of their like fundamental elements when when they accepted Anakin into the Order, and then you get the whole mess of him being promoted to the council without being a master. Like that's another boneheaded decision thinking about it. But this book had so many great points like that, and so many great quotes as well. I know you said you have a few quotes that you'd like to share. I mean, feel free to
Okay.
talk about those.
Well, okay. Well, one quote that I thought was pretty interesting was how Qui-Gon said, "Never assume your friends are above wrongdoing. Even good people can make mistakes." It's one that he talked about with he said that to Obi-Wan, referring to Rael and stuff, and I thought that was a really good quote. And then
Yeah.
another one. I mean, this was just um, this is just a pretty funny moment. Is whenever Obi-Wan is looking at Paijiao's planetary shield technology that protects them against solar flares, and then he said, "Hard to believe anyone on this planet could sleep at night with a solar shield this weak." And then as soon as he said that, Qui-Gon just thinks, man, how sheltered Obi-Wan still is.
Yeah.
And, to him, normal just means Coruscant.
Yeah, exactly. And that's another great thing too, is that, and I think it even discusses, like Qui Gon even has further criticism. He's like, why are we, if we say we're some sort of like really humble, modest religion, why do we have the nicest building on the nicest planet in the galaxy? Like he thinks they should be like in somewhere way more, I guess, remote, way more in tune with nature, because that again was another huge criticism he had. He's like, Jedi just lose their connection to the Force when they're on Coruscant because of how busy, nice, and distracting everything on Coruscant is. So that's another great example of one of Qui-Gon's disagreements with the Council.
Yeah, I definitely agree with you there. And, okay, well, just one more random thing. And this is what Rahara Wick says, and says this whole trip was nothing but a wild Minoc chase. Whenever they're searching, for Kyber
Right.
crystals, and say get the colon crystals, and the reason I said that, reason I want to mention that is, um, she says wild Minoc chase, but then in Revenge of the Sith, whenever Obi-Wan is talking to Anakin about finding Grievous on Utapau, he's like, well, it might just be a wild bantha chase. And
Oh yeah.
I'm just wondering, like, aren't you gonna have some consistency? If because you're not gonna say goose chase, because there's no geese in Star
Yeah.
Wars. But if you're gonna have wild Minok or wild Bantha, I say just stick to one and keep using that.
Yeah, Minok would make more sense 'cause I think Minok are a little bit more nimble than a Bantha is. A Bantha is a very large creature, one that would be easily trackable. So you would think I would think Minok. I would argue Minok makes more sense if Minoks are as nimble as I think they are. If I'm thinking of the right creature, but yeah, that is kind of funny. Just those little inconsistencies. I guess you can't line up everything. You could. I mean, you could, but I guess
Yeah,
it's just one.
yeah, and that's one more inconsistency, I think. So, harkening back to that Clone Wars season 6 episode that I talked about, where they're trying to discover, stuff with Master Sifo-Dyas and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Like Yoda goes to Chancellor Valorum to talk about this sort of thing, and then I'm like, I don't know, shouldn't they be talking to Chancellor Cash instead? Because see, now it's, I don't know, maybe I got my timeline wrong, and the story group knows a little bit more about what's happening, but I don't know. I was expecting Chancellor Valorum to be in this book going in, and then Cash, is the Chancellor at this point, but she's about to retire,
Right.
and stuff. But I'm still wondering because like Dooku was still involved in that as a Jedi.
Right.
Within the season 6 part with Sifo-Dyas and stuff, like he was
Mm-hmm.
still a Jedi in that
Right.
sense. Like he worked alongside Sifo-Dyas for that mission that they said, like they went to Felucia there and stuff. And I'm like, okay, that doesn't make sense because they said he left the Order before then, whenever Cash was the Chancellor,
Right.
and then now,
But now
in that
Valorum.
one,
Yeah.
Valorum is. So, like, I'm pretty sure it's an inconsistency, but I don't know. I don't know for sure.
Yeah.
But
Yeah. Won't press any further on that one. But I understand. And I think it was cool to see who came before. But it was cool to see Kaj in it because at least a lot of the stuff that I've really digested from Star Wars before the prequels hasn't, like, Kaj has never even really been mentioned. Like I've just been, Valorum was kind of as deep back as I would go before you jump way back into the Old Republic, Sith time frame. So I think they just wanted to give some more backstory and some more I guess canon material into the politics of Coruscant and the Republic. So it is an inconsistency, but I think it was at least neat of them to try to add a bit more depth to the political timeline at least. But I will leave the inconsistency to be debated as among but yeah, that is a very interesting and valid point there with that Chancellor issue.
yeah, and then one more thing. Well, I just looked it up on the Star Wars wiki, but
Mm-hmm.
it says that Chancellor Cash, like, this is her only appearance as of right now as the Master and Apprentice book,
Okay.
and had never been mentioned before.
Interesting. Okay, well that would explain why I've never heard of her before. But I mean that is interesting. Another, I guess, point of that, I guess, talking about the Jedi Council, is I guess it's a lot of the familiar faces. Eve Koth, Sassy Tin, Mace Windu. Who else was on there that we from the council that was just mentioned?
Well, Depa Billaba as well.
Yes, and of course Yoda. So
and then there was also Paulie Depashian, but he was the one that was retiring from the council, and that's why it opened up a seat for Qui-Gon to be the replacement.
That's right. Yeah. So there again, if you guys are really if you guys want to learn more about the council, and this is a great book to do so. It definitely gives insight as to the way council makes decisions, and there's even tension with Yoda and Qui-Gon, of course, as we see. Yoda even just tells him straight up, he's like, I don't want you on the council. He just like, I didn't know Yoda was like that. You're just like, oh my gosh, Yoda just, he did not care. Like, he was going to be really upfront about that. So, yeah.
And that reminds me of something else, though, but I know it was chapter 10 where Rael just mocks Yoda by saying, "Up the hell he should shut," when he's talking to Qui-Gon, and
yeah.
I don't know that. Uh, I wouldn't say I'm a big fan of that line as well, because that's the only time I've ever seen someone mock the way Yoda speaks, other than this this Lego Star Wars episode, what I think it was called, the Padawan Menace, and then Han Solo said that, "At least know how to speak normal, I do." He said that to Yoda. Yeah.
But yeah, I guess you could say like the first like serious piece of
Mm-hmm.
Star Wars content to come out.
Yep.
You can just tell just Rael is very anti status quo. Like he dressed in like rags, pretty
Yeah.
much, and when
Yeah.
he should have
Exactly.
been really professionally dressed for a position that he was in. I mean, he was advising the leader of the planet. Like you shouldn't, in theory, in practice, you shouldn't be like dressed as a homeless person.
Yeah. Not to mention the part where Qui-Gon entered his room to talk about the dream he had, and then this bartender Selby was in the bed
Yeah,
with
yeah.
him. And
Eh,
that they touched on that a little bit, but
Yeah, they did, and that was also more just quarrels that that Avaros had with I guess the Order. And didn't he mention something about Qui Gon Jinn having some sort of um, I guess you could say fling with it? Wasn't that like mentioned or suggested at some point that Qui Gon Jinn once like had some sort of intimate relationship with someone, if I remember
uh,
correctly?
well, I think that might be the Felucia thing as well.
Okay, yeah,
I think he might have brought up Felucia, like, as an
yeah,
incident whenever you know whenever the Selby dream telling
right.
event.
Yep. So, that's always a just more interesting aspects and connections between all of Dooku's Padawans, for sure. But I guess we can go into I'll just talk more about, I guess, Pajal itself. Of course, like it's as far as environment wise, like it didn't seem anything super, like different than what we've seen. Like we've seen like Kashyyyks and indoors and like similar kind of foresty moons, but planets, I guess, planets and moons, indoors and moon. But um, what did you think of kind of they talked about how the palace was like hidden, almost in a sense where like it was carved into the geography of Pajal, and it wasn't like meant to stand out. I think that really like signifies just how, um, I mean, simple but still very elegant Pajal is, kind of as like a planet. But what did you gather from that whole description of, I guess, the palace and how the royalty operates?
Um, uh, I mean, yeah, it's an interesting detail for sure, and how Obi-Wan didn't even notice, that they were right on top of, you know,
The palace.
the the palace
Yeah.
itself, and um, yeah, that's I don't know what more to say about that, but
Yeah. Yeah.
another
Yeah.
thing that I really like though is how they had the soul craft, um, you know vehicle, I guess is the right term,
Yeah.
and how it's so old, but it's so sacred to the people on that planet for different transportation, and apparently they go up in zero gravity as like a religious experience.
Right. That was really interesting and odd, right? Like everyone else in the galaxy, is like craving just to make sure that please make sure the anti gravity, system is, or no, not the anti, but the gravity system, is working in the ship. Like that's the first time I heard of people in Star Wars, at least, specifically like wanting zero gravity and like not even having any sort of gravity like on purpose for like any sort of reason, religious or just any reason at all. So
Well,
the Soulcraft were just very, yeah. No, go ahead.
okay, well, I was gonna say, well, in the very first episode of Rebels, Spark of Rebellion, they end up making, one of the Empire's craft zero gravity, so that way they can escape easier and stuff. But that was more for strategic purposes rather than for
Sure.
spiritual
Right.
based.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it was really interesting to see that, and just how much that the Pajali people, I guess is the correct way to, you know, say that, but how much they value tradition. Like the Great Hunt, I think is what it was called. You know, the part where the next leader like has to prove themselves by hunting down. Well, in this case, it was the crab droid, but it was just you could see that the planet still very much valued tradition, and that was like a huge part of how their society worked. So they were obviously, again, just kind of swept under the carpet in a lot of like these major galactic events and governments. They just flew under the radar, and it's like I said, just a world untouched, which is really cool to see. Because another thing is like, sure, we've seen untouched worlds in Star Wars, but a lot of them are still like very primal, you know, very, I guess, not nearly as elegant and as developed nations or societies. But Pajal is like it's still like it's pretty wealthy. Like there's a very intricate and like I guess not well thought out, but like there's a full functioning society and planet with cities living here, but they still like value tradition. That's just a really cool mix to see. I don't know if you noticed or picked up on any other details that kind of I guess relate to that.
No, no, not really. I mean, if you want, I'm sorry. If you could repeat the question though, but
No, I just like I mean, did you like pick up on anything or think anything interesting that this like planet seemed to be like so I mean modernized but not at the same time like they had
um,
a lot of like they were pretty well developed as like a society but they still were very
well,
held up in their traditions.
okay. Well, the number one thing that comes to mind is just the Chirka Corporation or Circa. I still don't know
Yeah,
how we're going to pronounce that, but
yeah,
just how that corporation is operating, and how I guess well entangled they are with Pyjal's government, especially their dealings with Princess Fanrai
mm-hmm.
and this treaty that they're going to sign, and just how much influence that they have within the whole planet. And it seems like um it seems like
No, I mean, you bring up like a very good point
okay,
here.
yeah, it seems like the people that you know are slaves, of
Right.
course they're in shambles, they're
Mm-hmm.
trying to survive, they're doing a bunch of hard labor. And so whereas other people are, can just be, part of, this chorus, for, to celebrate some event for the princess, and then this balloon shows up that, kind of scares them or some different stuff. But, that there's a lot of different, I guess, occupations, different things
Right,
happening, and
happening.
just
Yeah.
that, and those blackguards as well,
Yeah.
and how, and also just how Circa is operating on the moon as well, how they're digging it into the ground. I'm trying to think what the exact term was, but just digging so extensively, and it could cause geological damage.
Yeah,
Some
yeah. I mean, they're saying like they would destroy a planet just for a few bucks. I think is maybe what Rahara said about like what Churka is willing to do. And going back, we haven't even talked about really the character of Pax Marifer. That's how you pronounce his last name. Now, Pax was a very interesting and unique case because he was raised by protocol droids. Whenever his ship was, I guess, abandoned or everyone died actually from
yeah.
the voyage that they
uh,
were on.
well, from a pirate attack.
Right, from a pirate attack, and he like hid in some sort of cargo hold because he was small enough and lived. But he is a very interesting character. You can almost argue, ironically, one of the most level-headed and like critically thinking people in the book. Even as like weird and socially awkward as he may be, he at times made the most sense out of all of them. But I mean, did you like Pax as a character?
Yeah, yeah, I'd say so for sure. I mean, he definitely seems to be, I guess, more skeptical about these, different dealings that's going on. He hesitates to trust a lot of different people, be it Qui-Gon or really anyone else. But, his like connection with, you know, Rahara Wick is basically like his motivation to help them out and stuff.
Exactly.
Is because that's
Yeah.
what she wants.
Exactly.
So,
Yeah, he's doing it
he's gonna
because
have her
she's
back.
doing it. Exactly. Yeah. And you could tell like the relationship that Rahara and Rahara, I can't pronounce her name, but I guess correctly, and Pax, like it starts off as like just strictly business partners, and then it gets like a little bit more personable. Right? They kind of dabble in that. They kind of mention that. And then like it goes back to like the complete opposite, like just strictly business, and then it kind of floats back, and then eventually, of course, in we can start talking about this. Rahara eventually gets put back into slavery by Churka because they have the facial recognition droids, which I guess gives like Pax, like the first you could say real human motivation to actually do something about the situation, and of course he goes after Rahara, and you could tell like his beliefs and his philosophies, he kind of like shattered them by going back to Rahara because like it was so drilled into him by the proco droids. Like it's just a human, like they can be replaced. Don't form any sort of like serious relationship with any human. Like no good will come of it. Is kind of what he was taught. But he goes like directly against that. Of course, when he goes to save Rahara Wick in the what is the name of the Churka ship? It's the do you remember?
I know there were like 3 different names. Well, there were 3 different like ship names during the end of that.
Yeah, there's the Righteous, which was Fanrai's new name. What I just don't remember. I just remember the Churka ship. But
the leverage is
the leverage. Yeah. So of course the leverage sequence was just a very, it was a very great. It reminded me a lot actually of the liberation on Kessel in Solo, when everyone was running out of the mines. Everyone was running out of the slave working areas and rioting. So that was a very cool parallel to draw. But what did you think of their relationship and how it developed over time between Pax and Rahara?
Well, yeah, I'd say I really enjoyed it as well. I mean, I'm trying to think of what else to say that hasn't already been said already, but I'm I'm really at a loss here. I'm trying to think of anything.
I mean, like, did you? Did you like it? Like, were you like, did you enjoy seeing the relationship? I guess, like, do you just like how it evolved? Do you think it would have gone differently?
Well, I mean, I liked how it progressed a bit. Um, I the only thing I'm thinking of is, I feel like I don't know, Pax was able to find Raha Rahara a bit too easy in that thing, because you have things going on with Princess Fanray and stuff, and he's like, okay, well, let me just go to this ship right now, and oh look, there she is.
Yeah,
But
yeah, that was awfully convenient for sure.
But I mean, I still like both the characters. Like, I mean, especially the dynamic, like as you said, of his upbringing, how he was 5 years old with all these protocol droids on this ship, and he spent 15 years with them before a cruiser came and rescued them in a sense.
And I like also too, like whenever I guess Claudia Gray, started talking about the droids, she I think was extra careful not to use C3PO as one of the droid names, because there was like B3PO, G3PO, Z3PO, just different 3POs that I think that she I guess C3PO could be there's probably billions of C3POs made in the Star Wars universe, but obviously to avoid any confusion, there was the non-use of the C3PO protocol droid name, but
okay, so one more thing. Okay, now something's actually coming up, and like whenever I was blanking out like a minute and a half ago, but I really liked how Pax gave Rahara those 2 blue gloves.
Yes.
In a sense, like that gift, so that way she could hide her scar. I mean,
right.
It didn't really work out whenever she crashed and that droid showed up, but I mean, just the generosity of it,
exactly,
the thoughtfulness. I mean, that made me appreciate both characters more so through that
Yeah,
gesture.
definitely, definitely. And you can tell that, like, Pax is very like, he's just super practical. Like, he doesn't like even any sort of, like, he doesn't like anything that's not necessary. That goes as far as dialogue or like how time is consumed. He's like, oh, like, why is Rahera going and snacking, in the food area, or like, doing this or that, when she could be like searching, for ores and whatnot. Like, he's very it's just a workaholic almost, in the sense that everything he does is out of focused on, I guess, their kind of their scheme, their business, their hustle of finding gems. So that was also just a very different dynamic, but obviously, I guess, learning to cope with each one made each character, I guess, stronger. But
Yeah, I'd say so too. And then I also liked the significance of their ship, the Murix,
yep,
if that's how you pronounce that. I mean,
that's
I
that's
pretty
that's
much
how I
have to
imagine
ask how
it.
to
Yeah.
pronounce a lot of things, but just the symbolism of how that's one of the rarest, jewels in the galaxy, and they named that ship because that's their ultimate goal, or
Goal.
that's at least Pax's ultimate goal since it's his ship.
Right. Yeah, it's pretty. I mean, you can tell, like, yeah, if they find that gem, then they're gonna retire, before they even hit 20 years of age, at that rate. But I know that in a PAX was, of course, I really like the part where he went to the Churka representative and said, "Here's Kyber," and then she, like, fully believed it, and then bought it. And that also, I guess, if you were paying attention, whenever Obi-Wan and Qui-Gon, and also a very important detail maybe that Pax left out, was they were suspecting that maybe Churka was harvest. Like, if Churka had known what it actually was, they wouldn't have bought it off of Pax. They would have known that's not Kyber. But obviously, that's just a missed opportunity to really, I guess, rule out Churka as a potential supplier of, the Kyber that isn't Kyber, for
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
the Blackguard's shields. But just a small detail there that could have maybe changed the events in the book.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and then also, well, it was also crossing my mind if maybe they, I mean, it wasn't the case, but maybe if they knew that it was still the colon crystal, and
Mm-hmm.
yet that it still had some, power, as we saw that
Right.
Obi-Wan use at that treaty ceremony.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe they were trying to harvest that, but as we saw, no, they were throwing them out
Exactly.
right when those, right when, sorry, the black guards came.
Right.
Sorry, so.
Yeah. No. No. Yeah. No. That's too good. So yeah, it was interesting, and of course, tying in with it, there's the whole theory, not theory, but prophecy that Qui-Gon studied. Like, when the Kyber that isn't Kyber, appears, like the prophecies are about to happen, and that was kind of his confirmation. Like, okay, the chosen one, that prophecy is now, it's in motion. Like, it is, it's currently happening. So he kind of probably took a personal responsibility to find a chosen one, and he believed Anakin to be the chosen one. I would still argue that because of episodes 7, 8, and now 9 coming up, we don't know if Darth Vader or Anakin actually is the chosen one, because we don't know, of course, how 9 is going to leave the Force, which we could all speculate for days. We won't know until we finally see the movie, but that was also just another really cool element about the Cohen crystals. An interesting way to tie in this book into episode 9, even connecting the full, I guess, movie timeline. So yeah, I don't know. I mean, do you think that the Kyber that wasn't Kyber? I mean, do you think that was really like a pretty momentous part of the book?
Yeah, I'd say so. Like, it was definitely interesting how they tied that in, because at the first part we see Pax and Mahara asking Obi-Wan and Qui-Gon, hey, is this Kyber crystals stuff?
Right.
And they're like, oh, nope, no, it looks very similar from what from a macro level, but from a
Right.
microscopic level they're totally different.
Different. Exactly. And
And then and then whenever he reads these different prophecies again, he's like the Kai brothers and Cry, and then it just hits him again.
Yeah,
Like,
exactly.
going back to like harkening back to that, and I really liked that moment as well.
And yeah, yeah, it was. It was just so cool. I mean, Claudia Gray and I get her, of course, and then whoever else helped develop the stories and the philosophies, like how well it tied in. Super impressed with that part of the book. Were there any parts of the book or even characters that you weren't impressed with?
Well, I feel like we could. Okay. Um, okay. Well, let me look at the. Okay, so I think Wanbo the Hut at the very beginning
Yeah,
stuff.
yeah,
I don't know. Yeah, he was barely in the book, but I didn't really. I don't know. It was a bit hard getting into the book with them this mission to Teth, and yeah, I enjoyed the connection of Teth because that's the planet that Jabba the Hutt's son was kidnapped and taken to in the Clone Wars movie.
right.
But I mean, as far as like this first chapter and stuff, whenever they're on this mission, and Obi-Wan had trouble handling that door whenever Qui-Gon gave him those instructions and stuff. Like, yeah, that was all right, but just Wambo the Hutt and then Thurble, his like chief of staff, stuff like those two characters didn't really interest me. And I mean, luckily, they didn't have much to do with the rest of the book moving on, because then we start getting into Rahara, Pax, and all the stuff going on Pyjal. So that,
Yeah,
that that intrigued me a lot more than the Teth and Hut situation.
yeah, definitely. The beginning of the book, like, and of course, I think the main purpose was to establish like where Qui Gon and Obi Wan were in their relationship. Like that was the most apparent thing for me that came through from that sequence. But yeah, when the Huts are really like, there's plenty of like Jabba the Hutt, of course, is very iconic and very well done in episodes. I go 6 and 4 if you include the special editions, and 1 if you want to throw in that cameo too. But really 6 is where obviously his character is actually used. But I think this reminded me more of a whole Zero the Hutt situation, and everyone has their own.
Oh yeah.
To me,
No,
Zero the Hutt is one of the worst characters in Star Wars, but that's just me.
well,
And Wambo's right there.
do you know the planet that Zero the Hutt dies on?
Yeah. If you told me the name, because I watched it in the Clone Wars. Um,
Well, it's in the episode Hunt for Zero,
uh huh.
and it was Cy Snoodles, the singer,
Yeah.
and
Oh
Return of the Jedi
yes.
ends up killing him, but that's on the planet Teth as well.
Really?
Yeah.
That's
So
Teth.
that's now 3 connections to the planet Teth and the Huts, because you got Wambo the Hut here in chapter 1, then you got, you know, um, Rada the Hutlet,
Uh huh.
there, and then you also have Zero dying there. So,
And didn't wasn't there like some sort of like Mother Hut they talked to on Teth too
um,
in that
well,
same
that
episode?
was on Now Hutta.
Okay, that's on
Well,
Now Hutta.
yeah,
But
yeah,
yeah,
Mama the Hut.
yeah.
But
Zero the
yeah,
Hut, just the voice. Him, right? It's a boy, obviously.
yeah.
And the voice, I'm not trying to like, discriminate, but the voice is not. It's very feminine,
Well,
and
okay. Well, an interesting thing is that Corey Burton provides the voice of Zero the Hutt, and he also provides the voice of Count Dooku in the Clone Wars as well. Of course, not in the Clone Wars movie, because in that Christopher Lee was asked to reprise the role shortly before he passed away.
well, yeah,
So, but in all the other things, Corey Burton provides the voice of Count Dooku, and then Zero in this
yeah.
movie. So,
I think that they just I don't know what they were going for Zero, but whatever they did, they just made the character like super annoying. Like
yeah.
Zero was so annoying to just to listen to. It felt so slime. And maybe that I don't think we were supposed to like Zero though. If I'm being honest, like I don't think they were trying to develop him as like any sort of like Hut we'd be cheering for. I don't know. I just feel like that the Huts besides episode 6 have been a little bit iffy as
Yeah,
a
I can
species.
agree with you there.
Yeah, they've just been very weird.
Well,
And just a random thought I had. I don't know if you ever read and it's not canon, but I may have asked you this, but the Han Solo series by A.C. Crispin, it's a
I have
trilogy.
not.
There is
I've
a
not read.
scene. So you know how Jabba has his repulsor lift in episode 6 that he lays on.
Yes.
Okay, so imagine two huts just as big as him. Both huts hate each other so much that they decide to try to kill each other by ramming their repulsor lifts into one another and trying to take each hut off of their respective repulsor lifts.
Okay.
If you can, if you can envision that, that is a sequence in one of the books that has stuck with me ever since. Because once you read that and get that image in
Mhm.
your mind, you can't undo that.
Yeah. Okay.
Oh,
All right.
we're definitely straying off
Yeah.
from
Okay.
the
Well,
Master and
one
Apprentice,
other
but
character though that I wasn't the most intrigued with was Minister Orth.
oh yeah, yeah,
Like I thought she would be involved with the Blackguards in a way. Like that's who I was suspecting. Like, and then whenever in the Grand Hunt, she had a bunch of problems with her Varactyl, and I thought that that was intentional for some other reason to put the princess more in danger it because it made it more difficult for Qui-Gon to get over there and stuff because of her like messing up constantly on that thing, or just how she operated throughout the whole book. I mean, I don't know. I got a little bit annoyed.
yeah, yeah. Orth definitely was one of my favorites. Like I kind of dreaded the scenes, scene sequences, parts that she was in. It's like, okay, let's just get through this. It's just gonna be some, sort of
Yeah,
administrative, jabber. But
yeah, I know, and that, and she also, complained a whole lot throughout the
yeah,
whole.
yeah, yeah. It was
Like more so than, well, I mean, I guess Pax complained a lot, but
yeah,
for Pax it was more understandable. Like they didn't really flesh out Minister Orth enough for
right.
me to
Yeah,
care.
justify, yeah, to care or really, give any sort of thought into Orth. Yeah, Orth was definitely a weaker character. Um, I feel like Fanrai, like she could have been more developed like as a person, because like we knew most about her through Avaros. Like Avaros did this, Avaros did that, Avaros told her this, told her that, but we didn't see enough of like Fanrai. I feel like as an individual to really, I guess, get invested in her. So like whenever she twists, herself, into to that villainous role at the end, you're just like, okay, like I
Uh,
couldn't care less if Fanrai dies. But that was me. I don't know. Did you
yeah.
think that too?
Well, the twist itself surprised me.
Yeah.
I
Oh yeah,
didn't
it
see
surprised
that
me
coming.
too. Definitely.
But then, like after that ceremony itself, where Merritt Cole escapes, whenever you know Caddy, no, it wasn't Caddy, but it was Darren and shoots at Merritt. After that scene itself, and then um, Princess Fanrai then leaves and goes aboard a ship. That's when I start to lose a bit of interest because it's like you had me at that scene, but then she goes off to do other stuff, and I don't know. It just felt a little bit. I don't know. It felt like mis
Forced.
misplaced, or the
Sure.
pacing.
Yeah. No, I
Because I feel
understand that.
like that ceremony thing was like the climax of stuff, and then you
Right.
like, no, let's do some different ship stuff with her, and I
Yeah,
don't know,
I felt like
but
the ceremony was like a little bit too like abrupt in that sense. Like it just kind of
mhm.
happened. Like
Yeah,
it was.
yeah. I moved on too quickly.
Yeah, exactly. Like there wasn't. I feel like I definitely could have done with more explanation of like to how they were like laid out, how um Fanrai and Darren were like positioned like strategically compared to like Obi-Wan and Qui-Gon, because like I kind of had to reread how like they were all like placed within that palace to really understand what was going on and like why Obi-Wan couldn't like use his lightsaber to strike down anyone that quickly, and how that shield would have sliced Obi-Wan, because like I couldn't really see it like the first read through. Like I had to go through and reread it again to kind of get a better understanding of it all. And that could have just been me, but I mean, I had to do it still. So I don't know if you had difficulty understanding what was going on at first or not.
Yeah, a little bit for sure.
Okay, so it maybe not just been me on that one, but yeah, but overall, I mean, it was still good. Like the action was good, the story was good. There was nothing like ridiculous that made me like shake my head and like put the book down. Like it kept me engaged and kept me wanting for more. So between and I know you've read this is my first Claudia Gray book, but I know you've read more Claudia Gray books. How does this one stack up compared to the others?
Well, okay, so okay, so I've only read one other Claudia Gray book, and that would be Bloodline. And I know she's also written Lost Stars, and then one other one. I'm trying to think. Yeah, Princess of Alderaan. That's it. So, yeah, those are the Star Wars books she's written. She's also made over a dozen other non-Star Wars books. But I have Leia, Princess of Alderaan, and Lost Stars in my bedroom right now. Haven't picked it up yet to start reading. But I mean, as for Bloodline, I mean, I really enjoyed it. That's with just to give a brief description, that's with Princess Leia, and she's at the she's on Hosnian Prime for most of the book, and is dealing with some different factions between the New Republic with the populist and centrist parties, and they're very divided, and they have trouble agreeing on anything. And then she decides to go on this investigation and takes this person of the opposite party with her who's a lot younger, and some different conflicts ensue, but yet they form some sort of bond as well.
Yeah.
And I really enjoyed that. I know there's a brief, connections in here, and I'm sure if I read Leia, Princess of Alderaan, and Lost Stars, then I'd probably be more inclined to see these different connections. But I know like in this book, Master and Apprentice, they mentioned, Qui-Gon, drinking either Corellian ale or port in a storm.
Yeah.
And port in a storm is this beverage that they tackle in Bloodline, where Leia's assistant is from like this planet, and this drink is like really difficult to
digest.
Digest in a sense, to really get down your throat.
Yep.
Stuff. But yeah, so yeah, there's the scene where they go to this bar, her assistant and stuff, and she's able to drink it to therefore help out with this upcoming job and stuff. So I enjoyed that brief mention there. And then they also mentioned the planet Ryoza in the book earlier. I know.
Okay. I mean, I wouldn't have caught it. Yeah.
Ryoza, that's this mission that Qui-Gon and Ral, I think that they were on or something. I know they mentioned that in chapter 10, this Ryoza mission, and that's the planet that. Okay, I'm trying to think of, but the person that Leia forms that bond with on the opposite side of the party, yeah, that's the planet that he's from.
Okay.
So that was a nice connection.
That's a nice connection, definitely. If you had to choose which book you enjoyed or thought was better than the other, could you, and which one would you choose?
Oh man, honestly, I think I'm leaning a bit more towards Bloodline.
Okay.
Master and Apprentice, but
yeah,
they're both on quite a high regard, and not much of a difference in terms of my enjoyment level.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. The only book I can compare this to, as far as I guess the Disney canon era, that's probably the best way to refer to it, is Tarkin. Yep, and that's a James Luceno book. And that one was way different because Master and Apprentice kind of focused on a plot, of course, with and of course but it obviously had very good character development But Tarkin is obviously about one character the entire, so they're kind of different in that sense.
Yeah.
Um, but
Okay.
if yeah, go ahead.
Okay. Well, just a couple quick things.
Mm-hmm.
One, it was Ransom Casterfoe. That's the name of Leia's, ally, despite
Yeah,
being on the other party, and is from
yeah.
Ryoza. Ransom Casterfoe, just for you all who are aware. And then also, one thing that you brought up Tarkin, and a lot of it that I enjoyed about Tarkin was his upbringing of hunting as well, and
Oh
that's
yeah.
like his you know planet's tradition, or at least within his family as
Mm-hmm.
well.
Yeah, yeah.
So, and whenever they had that grand hunt,
Mm-hmm.
I was thinking a little bit of that, except that was on a much more mild scale
Yeah,
than
it
what
was.
Tarkin went through,
Yeah,
obviously.
Tarkin was going through. Yeah, obviously way more extra, but still, it's still relatable. It's still comparable. Um, I will say, I personally highly suggest, especially if you're interested in the Force and the Jedi, the prequel era Jedi, the Council, the politics of the Galactic Republic. If you're interested, in that sort of stuff, the content stuff, prequel era stuff, this book is right up your alley. I mean, it's gonna cover everything you want. It's gonna touch on what you know and like what you're already interested in and expand it while also introducing completely new stuff to dive into as well, and it does it really well. Um, it's a hard choice, but I think at the end of the day, I would still choose Tarkin over Master and Apprentice. Me personally, I don't know. What about you?
Um, uh, I wish I would have made up my mind before this interview started, but uh, uh you know what? I'll say, I like this book more than Tarkin.
Okay, yeah.
That,
I mean, I can understand it. I mean, they're both awesome
yeah,
books. I
yeah.
thoroughly enjoyed both of them. Now, I have to, and of course, I always, kind of play this game with myself, or kind of ask myself this question: um, would you want to see this book be developed into a movie and or kind of like mini series, like live action mini series? Would you want to see this on the big screen, essentially, or on your TV?
Um, sheesh. I'm always thinking. See, I don't have a definitive answer, but what I will say is, whenever I'm reading these books, I'm always thinking, man, I kind of wish they would have just made a movie covering this, but then they'd also have to cut quite a bit of this stuff
Yeah,
out,
yeah,
you know.
exactly.
And then I'm also thinking, well, yeah, and then some, these characters, the actors who played them in the movies have aged differently. So then I'm thinking, okay, maybe it's better if they just do an animated version, and then they can still have the same, people reprise their role and stuff.
And
So,
that is a very interesting point. But I do
uh,
think too with like live action stuff. I think that in my opinion, in my eyes, Solo proved that we can recast Star Wars characters effectively. Like Han Solo is my favorite character in Star Wars, like of all time. And if I personally think that my favorite character of all time can be recast and still like resemble and be Han Solo, I think that anyone can be recast. And maybe that's an unpopular opinion, which is fine. But I personally would be perfectly okay with Qui-Gon and Obi-Wan being recast if they were to make this into some sort of live action product.
as opposed to Liam Neeson and Ewan McGregor having CGI to make their faces look significantly younger.
Uh, and that's a good point. Well, if the technology is there, maybe that would be a better option and one that I would fully support. I think that the Rogue One CGI looked good, but we only saw the CGI for at max 30 seconds with Tarkin. So I don't know if it
Mhm.
would how it would hold up through an entire
Okay.
movie in theory.
Well, yeah, but in that instance, they're making an actor resemble another character
True,
that they
true.
didn't play.
Yes.
Whereas,
Yeah.
I'm also thinking about like Ant-Man as well. They made Hank Pym younger there, just like also in Captain Marvel they made Samuel L. Jackson look a lot younger, and that because they used de-aging with the same actor instead
Okay.
of having another actor with CGI over their face.
Okay. Well, I
But
mean, okay. I mean, I would definitely welcome that as well. I wasn't really fully aware of the capabilities of de-aging. I'm sure, modern day Hollywood magic, I shouldn't underestimate anything, but if they could de-age, I mean, of course, that would be my first choice. If they could somehow make it work with Ewan McGregor and, oh my gosh, I just blanked on his name. Liam
What,
Neeson.
Liam Neeson?
Liam
Yeah.
Neeson, yeah.
And then
And yeah, so if they could de-age them somehow,
yeah,
then do it. Yeah, that'd be awesome.
yeah, and not only that, but I'm at least 90% sure, if not more, that that's what they plan on doing for the Cassian TV show. For
Okay.
using Diego Luna and making him look
Yeah,
younger.
de-aging him. It's definitely, way easier to do because like they are still relatively young, whereas if we think about it, like if they had a de-age Harrison Ford for Solo, you know, I love Harrison Ford so much, but just the sheer amount of time between Solo younger than Episode 4 versus Harrison Ford now,
Yeah.
especially in terms of like mobility and like capability as like physical limitations, it would have been way harder. But I can definitely see it becoming way more feasible with Liam Neeson and Ewan McGregor, definitely.
Mhm.
But yeah, um, that's what I'll say on that. But yeah, I would love to see some sort of cinematic live action adaptation made, but we never know. I'm still waiting on that Tarkin movie, and it's probably never gonna happen. So yeah. Any final thoughts that you want to talk about the book? Anything we left out? You think that still needs to be talked about, or anything at all, man? Feel free to say what's on your
Well,
mind.
okay, well, just one more quote that I really liked
Yeah.
in this book was whenever Qui-Gon says that you're too dedicated to ideals rather than reality, Obi-Wan, to the point of sacrificing your principles.
Yeah. That
I thought that was another really good quote as
it
well,
was.
of just distinguishing the difference, of you know the moral quandaries of Qui-Gon and Obi-Wan, and different ways of how they operate and view, right from wrong, and then, duty and following orders as well.
Yeah. Yeah. I definitely think that was another really impactful quote. One that really um almost when he said it too might have created even more of a rift between them temporarily, because they were really, you could tell that things were getting really tense between the three Jedi, between Everus, Qui-Gon, and Obi-Wan, between all three of them. And yeah, they were really calling each other out at one point, and that's a perfect example of that. And just that quote really that stuck. Quotes like that really stuck with me throughout the book and really resonated throughout the story. Definitely. So you hit the nail on the head with that one.
Yep. All right. You have any other final thoughts?
No. I think we talked about everything. I could talk about Star Wars and the book and everything else for hours, much longer than this. But I think for time's sake, for our poor listeners, we might want to start drawing to a conclusion here. But if anyone else wants to join in the conversation with Master and Apprentice, feel free to give us a shout on Twitter or however you guys can reach us. We are definitely open to any ideas or things you want to add to our discussion here. We're always more than welcome to talk some more as much as we can on Twitter. And if anyone else wants to share, if you guys have your own book review of Master and Apprentice, I'd love to get as many thoughts through my head as possible. This is a relatively new book, so I don't know how many people have had the chance to pick it up and read it yet. Thankfully, Trever and I were both able to kind of binge read the book within the past month or so. I read quite a lot here the past few days, but I'm glad because it was a great book, sucked me right in. But yeah, you guys feel free to give us a shout, and we would love to read what you guys have to say. But I think Trever, again, thank you so much for coming back on and talking with us. It's always great to hear your thoughts and your insight and your just knowledge of Star Wars. It's very much appreciated. It's awesome to have you on, definitely.
Thank you very much, Tristan. Pleasure's all mine.
Absolutely. So with that, we will leave you guys with, I guess, an outro. We'll just kind of wing it here because Jeff's not here to to, I guess, wrap things up. But for those of you that are listening on YouTube, I will include all of Trevor's stuff in the description of this video. The link to his historical stuff. We will get his Twitter account all plugged in here and make sure that you guys can reach him and check out what he is doing. And of course, KantoCast people, same thing. It'll be in the show notes. You guys have probably, hopefully, checked out Trevor's stuff before. If not, or if you guys want to kind of check back up with and, you know, get an update on what Trevor's up to, great opportunity to do so. And yeah, we'll get all that taken care of. So thank you guys so much for listening, for watching on YouTube, and we hope to bring you guys more content in the future. But for now, I'm Tristan.
And I'm Trever.
And may the force be with you.
Always.